The night they tried to erase me chapter summary at exactly 9:17 p.m., I watched my father sign away $4.8 million in family assets to my younger brother while pretending I didn't exist. Minutes later, my white fiancé, Ethan Caldwell, publicly mocked my career as a corporate crisis attorney and ended our engagement, calling me too ambitious. They believed humiliating me was their final victory. What they didn't know was that I had already signed a confidential legal agreement that would change every one of their lives forever. Target word count, 600 at exactly 9:17 p.m. My father uncapped his Montblanc pen and signed away $4,800,000 in family assets as though I had never carried our family's name. The sound of ink scratching across expensive paper echoed louder than the string quartet performing across the ballroom. Crystal chandeliers reflected golden light onto polished marble floors while waiters drifted between guests carrying champagne that cost more than most families earned in a month. I remained perfectly still. No tears. No protest. No surprise. My father, Harold Johnson, had spent my entire life teaching me that love inside our family always came with conditions. Achievement earned temporary approval. Obedience earned silence. Being his dark-skinned eldest daughter earned neither. My son has earned the responsibility, my father announced proudly, sliding the leather portfolio toward my younger brother, Marcus. The room erupted into applause. Marcus accepted the documents with a smile that looked almost apologetic. Almost. He never questioned why every investment, property deed, and trust account suddenly belonged to him. Perhaps he never wanted the answer. My mother adjusted the diamond bracelet resting against her wrist before offering the guests her practiced smile. "This is exactly how your grandfather wanted it," she said smoothly. It was a lie. I knew it. She knew it. What they didn't know was that I possessed copies of every amendment ever drafted for my grandfather's estate. The original documents told a very different story. Across the ballroom, conversations resumed as though nothing extraordinary had happened. Wealth had a strange way of making injustice appear respectable. I lifted my glass of sparkling water and quietly observed every face. People avoided my eyes. They thought humiliation became easier when nobody acknowledged it. They were wrong. A familiar voice interrupted the music. "Ladies and gentlemen, Ethan Caldwell, my fiancé. Or at least the man everyone still believed would become my husband." His navy tuxedo fit perfectly, matching the confidence stretched across his face. He wrapped one arm around my brother's shoulder before smiling toward the guests. "I think tonight is the perfect opportunity to clear up a misunderstanding." Several guests laughed politely. I didn't move. Ethan turned toward me with the same expression he usually reserved for opposing counsel inside a courtroom. "You've all assumed Naomi and I were planning a wedding." He paused deliberately. "We're not." The ballroom fell silent. Even the violinists stopped playing. Ethan smiled wider. "I've realized I need someone who understands family priorities instead of chasing another promotion." Soft laughter drifted through the room. He wasn't finished. "Naomi is an excellent attorney," he continued. "Brilliant, actually. But she's far too ambitious to ever become the kind of wife I want." Several executives nodded. One woman lowered her eyes. Nobody defended me. The words should have hurt more than they did. Instead, they clarified everything. For years, Ethan had admired my success only when it benefited his reputation. The moment my career began surpassing his, admiration quietly transformed into resentment. They thought they were watching my future collapse. They had absolutely no idea they were witnessing my freedom. I calmly removed the engagement ring and placed it on the nearest champagne tray. "I wish you everything you're truly looking for," I said softly. "Nothing more. Nothing less." Confusion flickered across Ethan's face. He expected anger. He expected tears. He expected negotiation. Instead, he received silence. The most dangerous response a strategist can offer. At exactly 6:45 p.m. that same evening, nearly 3 hours before this performance began, I had signed a confidential legal agreement inside the downtown offices of Carter Ellison LLP. Judge Evelyn Carter herself had witnessed every signature. The agreement remained sealed, protected, irrevocable, and directly connected to financial records neither my family nor Ethan knew existed. As I walked toward the ballroom exit, cool night air rushed against my face. Behind me, laughter returned. Champagne glasses clinked together in celebration. They celebrated my downfall, while unknowingly signing the first page of their own. The hero no one wanted to thank. Chapter summary. Months after walking away from my family's betrayal, I had rebuilt my life as chief legal officer of a Fortune 500 corporation. During the annual shareholder gala, a veteran security guard risked everything to save the CEO from an assassination attempt. Instead of rewarding him, the board sacrificed him to protect its reputation. Watching history repeat itself forced me to make a decision that would change all of our lives. 6 months had taught me one lesson that no courtroom ever could. People rarely changed. Only the stage did. The betrayal that happened inside my family's ballroom had been replaced by polished executive offices overlooking downtown Chicago. Floor-to-ceiling windows reflected the morning skyline, while my name sat beneath a brushed steel plaque reading, "Naomi Johnson, Chief Legal Officer." I had earned every letter. No inheritance. No family connections. No favors. Only thousands of hours spent protecting companies when they were falling apart. Ironically, I had become an expert at saving organizations from crises while quietly accepting that my own family had never wanted to save me. At exactly 7:42 p.m., the annual shareholder gala began. More than 400 guests filled the grand ballroom of the Lawson Grand Hotel. Investment bankers, corporate directors, state officials, major shareholders. Television cameras covered every entrance. Everything looked perfect. Too perfect. I noticed Marcus Brooks standing near the East Security checkpoint. His uniform was immaculate despite years of service. His gray hair framed a calm face that had probably witnessed more corporate secrets than anyone inside the building. Marcus greeted every employee exactly the same way. With respect. Even executives who barely acknowledged his existence received a polite smile. People often underestimated men like Marcus. I never did. The CEO, Richard Lawson, stepped onto the stage as applause rolled through the ballroom. "Ladies and gentlemen," he began, "this has been the most successful year in our company's history." I listened while scanning the room out of habit. Years in corporate law had taught me something important. Real danger rarely announced itself. It blended into ordinary moments. Near the rear entrance, I noticed a catering employee moving against the normal traffic pattern. His eyes never looked toward the buffet. They remained fixed on the stage. Every instinct inside me tightened. Before I could speak into my security radio, Marcus moved. He wasn't running. He wasn't panicking. He simply changed direction with remarkable purpose. Everything happened within seconds. The man reached beneath the serving cart. Metal flashed beneath the ballroom lights. Marcus slammed into him before anyone understood what was happening. The loud crack that followed echoed across the ballroom. Guests screamed. Champagne glasses shattered across marble flooring. Security teams rushed forward. Marcus wrestled the attacker to the ground while shielding the CEO with his own body. The smell of gunpowder drifted through the air. My heartbeat remained steady. My legal mind was already recording details. Time. Witnesses. Sequence of events. Evidence. Richard Lawson stood frozen. Alive. Only because Marcus Brooks had acted without hesitation. Paramedics arrived within minutes. Federal agents secured the ballroom. News helicopters circled overhead before the evening ended. Every television network called Marcus a hero. For nearly 12 hours. Then the company's public relations department took control. 3 days later, I attended a confidential executive board meeting. No cameras. No shareholders. No media. Only polished mahogany, expensive suits, and carefully chosen words. The chairman cleared his throat. Marcus Brooks violated executive protection protocol. Silence followed. Another director nodded. His actions exposed the corporation to liability. Liability. That single word carried more weight than courage. I leaned back without speaking. The vote happened quickly. Termination. Effective immediately. No pension increase. No public recognition. No commendation. Just a severance package designed to make the problem disappear. One director actually smiled. Our insurance carrier recommends distancing the company from unnecessary hero narratives. Hero narratives. I almost admired the cruelty hidden inside corporate language. Outside the boardroom, Marcus quietly packed photographs from his locker into a small cardboard box. 32 years of loyalty reduced to one container. When he noticed me watching, he smiled. I suppose they had their reasons. His voice carried no bitterness. Only disappointment. I remembered standing inside my father's ballroom months earlier. Different building. Different people. Same lesson. Loyal black employees remained valuable only until integrity became inconvenient. That evening my phone rang. Judge Evelyn Carter asked me to meet her at her office. She had retired from the federal bench years earlier, but wisdom never retired. Neither did preparation. Her office smelled faintly of old books and fresh coffee. Without saying much, she opened a desk drawer and placed a small black flash drive in front of me. I've been waiting until you were ready, she said quietly. I looked at the device. What is it? Evidence. She folded her hands. Confidential contracts. Internal audit reports. Executive emails. Insurance records. Everything they hoped would never leave the building. I picked up the flash drive. It felt almost weightless. Its contents would prove anything but. Judge Carter looked directly into my eyes. They think they fired one security guard. She paused. I think they just exposed an entire empire. As I slipped the flash drive into my briefcase, I realized the company believed Marcus Brooks was disposable. The flash drive proved the executives were. Silence was my strongest strategy. Chapter summary. While quietly building an airtight legal case, I worked alongside a trusted security veteran and a retired federal judge to expose years of executive corruption. As the evidence grew, the company's outside attorney, who once underestimated me, returned believing intimidation would force me into surrender. Instead, every insult, every threat, and every careless word became another piece of evidence. The biggest mistake powerful people make is believing confidence can replace proof. By the time the board realized someone was looking beneath the surface, I had already spent 7 weeks following every signature, every approval, and every dollar that disappeared into places nobody expected me to examine. Every morning I arrived before sunrise. Every evening I left long after the cleaning crews finished their work. The office became strangely peaceful after dark. The soft hum of computers replaced executive conversations, while city lights reflected across the glass walls surrounding my office. Silence made patterns easier to recognize. Financial records never lied. People did. Marcus met me every Tuesday evening inside a small conference room that overlooked the parking garage. He carried a notebook filled with observations collected during his 32 years protecting executives. I always thought something felt wrong, he told me one evening. But nobody ever asked what security noticed. I smiled. They underestimated the only people who watched everything. Marcus nodded quietly. Executives never look at the people holding doors. They should, I answered. Judge Evelyn Carter joined us whenever legal interpretation became necessary. Retirement had never slowed her mind. She reviewed contracts with remarkable precision, highlighting clauses that appeared ordinary until connected with dozens of similar agreements. One document became 10. 10 became 50. Eventually the entire picture appeared. Executive bonus payments authorized during years the company officially reported financial hardship. Insurance reimbursements submitted for incidents that internal reports described completely differently. Termination agreements targeting experienced black managers while similarly ranked white executives received promotions and retention bonuses. The numbers continued growing. $21 million. $34 million. $48 million. Finally, $63,700,000. The amount appeared repeatedly through subsidiaries, consulting agreements, and insurance settlements. It wasn't one mistake. It was a carefully engineered system. I closed another file and leaned back. They thought nobody would ever connect all of this. Judge Carter adjusted her glasses. They didn't expect someone trained to investigate corporate disasters. The room fell quiet again. Sometimes truth required patience more than brilliance. 3 days later my assistant announced an unexpected visitor. Ethan Prescott is here. I wasn't surprised. People like Ethan always returned when they sensed control slipping away. He entered my office carrying expensive confidence and an even more expensive briefcase. His smile never reached his eyes. It's been a while, Naomi. It has. I represent the board now. I assumed as much. He looked around my office before sitting without invitation. You've done well. I work hard. He laughed softly. You always worked too hard. The old version of me would have searched his face for approval. That woman no longer existed. Ethan folded his hands. The board believes you're becoming unnecessarily curious. I wasn't aware curiosity violated company policy. His smile faded. You've built an impressive career. So I've been told. But remember something. He leaned forward. You're successful because larger people allowed you opportunities. There it was. The quiet arrogance hidden beneath polished language. I simply watched him. He mistook silence for uncertainty. You've always believed you were the smartest attorney in every room. I believe preparation matters. You confuse preparation with intelligence. Still, I said nothing. He continued talking. Exactly as I hoped. The board is prepared to question your judgment. I folded my hands. I'm listening. If confidential information somehow became public. He paused deliberately. Your law license could become a topic of discussion. Outside my office window, rain tapped softly against the glass. Inside, Ethan believed he controlled the conversation. What he didn't know was remarkably simple. Every meeting involving outside counsel inside executive offices was automatically recorded under corporate compliance policy. I had personally updated that policy 8 months earlier. Visible notification lights glowed quietly above the conference camera. He never noticed. He kept talking. The evidence you've been reviewing can disappear. It can also be misunderstood. Careers end over misunderstandings. I smiled. Not because I found him amusing. Because every sentence strengthened my position. Threats sounded very different when replayed before investigators. Especially when delivered by corporate counsel. Ethan frowned. You're unusually calm. I've learned calm people make fewer mistakes. He stood slowly. You should think carefully before choosing sides. I already have. He reached the door before turning once more. The board always wins. After he left, the room became wonderfully quiet. I pressed one button beneath my desk. The compliance system archived the entire recording into secure legal storage. Time-stamped. Encrypted. Unavailable for alteration. Marcus entered several minutes later. How did it go? I handed him a copy of the meeting transcript already generated by the recording software. His eyebrows lifted. He gave you everything. No. I closed the folder carefully. He gave the truth everything. Some victories never required raised voices. Some battles ended long before the other side realized they had started losing. People often imagine strength as the loudest person inside the room. Experience had taught me something entirely different. Sometimes silence isn't surrender. Sometimes it's evidence. The boardroom chose the wrong woman. The rain had stopped an hour before sunrise, leaving the city wrapped in cold silver light. By 8:55 a.m., every seat inside the executive boardroom was occupied. Billionaire investors lined one side of the polished oak table. Federal compliance officials quietly reviewed thick binders. Financial journalists waited near the back with cameras pointed toward the stage. Everyone expected another routine shareholder meeting. I knew better. I adjusted the sleeve of my tailored midnight black suit before stepping through the glass doors. The fabric wasn't expensive because I wanted attention. It reminded me of armor. Every stitch represented years spent earning respect that others received automatically. The conversations stopped. Not because I had spoken. Because I had arrived. The chairman offered a practiced smile. Ms. Brooks, thank you for joining us. I returned a polite nod. My attendance was never optional. A few investors exchanged curious glances. Across the room sat Daniel Mercer, the corporation's outside counsel. His reputation had been built on intimidation rather than integrity. He smiled with complete confidence, convinced today's meeting would end exactly as he expected. He couldn't have been more mistaken. The chairman welcomed the shareholders before inviting Daniel to present the board's findings. Daniel stood confidently. Ladies and gentlemen, an internal review has confirmed that recent allegations against senior leadership are entirely without merit. The presentation behind him displayed colorful charts and carefully selected statistics. Every executive bonus complied with board policy. Another slide appeared. Our insurance reimbursements followed all applicable regulations. He paused dramatically. The accusations we've recently seen are based on misunderstandings rather than facts. Several directors nodded. They believed they were watching the end of the investigation. They had absolutely no idea it hadn't even begun. Daniel smiled toward me. If anyone believes otherwise, now would be an appropriate time to present credible evidence. The chairman looked in my direction. Ms. Brooks? I stood slowly. No opening statement. I connected my laptop to the projection screen. The first image appeared. Assigned executive approval dated March 14, 2022. No commentary. Only the document. Silence settled across the room. The second document appeared. A bank transfer authorizing $8,420,000 to a consulting company that existed only on paper. Someone shifted uncomfortably. I clicked again. Insurance claim records. Internal emails. Approval signatures. Audit summaries. Each document connected perfectly with the next. No opinions. Only facts. Daniel cleared his throat. Those records don't provide context. I looked toward him calmly. The context is on page 43. I opened another file. The highlighted paragraph appeared on the screen. A federal compliance officer immediately began taking notes. Daniel's confidence faded slightly. I continued. This email authorized payments after auditors rejected them. Another click. This transfer occurred 3 days before quarterly earnings were announced. Another. This executive certified information later proven false. The room became remarkably quiet. I never raised my voice. I never accused anyone. The documents did that for me. One director leaned toward another. I've never seen those files. A second director whispered nervously. Neither have I. The chairman's forehead glistened beneath the bright lights. Daniel interrupted again. These documents were obtained without authorization. I calmly reached into my folder. I anticipated that concern. I placed a compliance authorization letter beneath the projector. Signed. Dated. Approved by the corporation itself. The federal regulator adjusted her glasses before reading every line. Authorization appears valid. Daniel remained silent. For the first time all morning, he had nothing prepared. I wasn't finished. A video began playing. Security footage. Time-stamped. Clear. Unedited. Executives entering a private conference room. Boxes of financial records leaving through a restricted exit later that evening. Matching delivery receipts appeared beside the video. Every movement matched every document. One shareholder slowly removed his glasses. My God. Another whispered, they knew. The chairman attempted to interrupt. We need a private recess. A federal investigator answered before I could. No. The single word echoed across the room. Nobody moved. Daniel gathered his papers with shaking hands. This meeting has become inappropriate. The regulator looked directly at him. Counselor, I strongly recommend you remain seated. He obeyed. Not because he wanted to. Because he finally understood the room no longer belonged to the board. It belonged to the evidence. Every executive suddenly searched for someone else to blame. I never approved that. The finance department handled those transfers. I relied on legal. I trusted accounting. Their unity disappeared within seconds. Fear replaced loyalty. The investors watched without speaking. So did I. The chairman slowly lowered his head. I thought protecting the company required protecting its leadership. I answered quietly. Protecting corruption always destroys the company. Nobody argued. Nobody defended him. The silence carried more weight than any closing statement ever could. Outside the windows, the morning sun finally broke through the clouds. Inside, every carefully constructed lie had collapsed beneath the weight of documented truth. Nobody interrupted me. Nobody could. The reward no one expected chapter summary. The public hearing ended in complete silence after months of carefully hidden corruption came into the open. Federal investigators arrived with warrants already prepared, while executives who once controlled every conversation suddenly struggled to explain their own signatures. The employee they had treated as invisible expected nothing more than an apology. Instead, the company made a decision that stunned the business world and proved integrity was worth more than influence. The room changed before anyone stood. One moment it was a boardroom filled with polished confidence. The next, it felt like a courtroom waiting for judgment. No executive spoke. No investor checked a phone. Even the reporters behind the cameras remained unusually quiet. Everyone understood the meeting had crossed a line that could never be erased. At exactly 11:18 a.m., the elevator doors opened. 6 federal investigators entered the executive floor wearing navy jackets displaying silver government badges. Behind them walked representatives from the Securities and Exchange Commission and the Department of Justice. Nobody had invited them. They didn't need an invitation. The lead investigator approached the chairman without raising his voice. We have court-authorized warrants regarding financial misconduct, obstruction of justice, and destruction of corporate records. The words settled over the room like heavy rain. Across the table, several executives exchanged nervous glances. For years they had controlled every investigation. Today they controlled nothing. The investigator continued calmly. We ask everyone to remain seated until instructed otherwise. Nobody argued. They couldn't. Every document projected on the screen had already become part of the official record. Every signature had a timestamp. Every transfer had a destination. Every approval carried a name. Truth had become impossible to negotiate. One executive attempted a weak smile. There must be some misunderstanding. The investigator opened a folder. We've spent 9 months making sure there wasn't. Silence answered him. I remained seated with my hands folded on the conference table. There was nothing left for me to prove. Evidence had already finished speaking. Across the room, outside counsel Daniel Rhodes suddenly stood. You can't blame the legal department for record management. Nobody had accused him. Not yet. He kept talking. The finance office asked us to destroy duplicate files after the audit. The room froze. His own words echoed against the glass walls. He slowly realized what he had admitted. One investigator looked up from his notebook. "Would you repeat that statement?" Daniel's face lost every trace of color. I meant archived. You said destroyed. I misspoke. The investigator wrote another note. Thank you. Nobody tried to rescue him. They thought they were protecting one another. Fear made them strangers within seconds. One director pointed toward another. He approved the payments. Another immediately replied. I signed what legal recommended. The chief financial officer shook his head. I warned everyone the reimbursements weren't compliant. Everyone suddenly remembered their innocence. Nobody remembered their signatures. That was the problem with dishonesty. It required perfect memories. Truth required none. Security officers quietly entered the room. Ironically, they were employees trained by the very man the company had dismissed months earlier. One by one, executives gathered their personal belongings. No handcuffs. No shouting. Only quiet instructions. Sometimes dignity disappears more painfully than freedom. As they walked toward the elevators, television cameras waiting outside captured every step. The business world watched in real time. Breaking news alerts appeared across financial networks within minutes. Shareholders stared silently at the screens. Nobody celebrated. Corporate failure affects thousands of innocent families long before it affects executives. I thought about receptionists, maintenance crews, young interns, single parents, people who trusted leadership to protect their livelihoods. Those were the real victims, not the people leaving under investigation. Near the back of the room stood Harold Gaines. For 34 years he had protected this building. He expected nothing. His retirement papers had already been completed after the board dismissed him weeks earlier. He quietly approached me. I suppose I should clean out my locker. His voice carried disappointment rather than anger. I smiled gently. I don't think today is ending the way you expect. Before he could answer, the interim governance committee entered. Their chairwoman carried a sealed envelope bearing the company's corporate seal. She asked everyone remaining to stand. We have one final matter. The room became silent again. She opened the envelope carefully. Following the emergency vote of the Independent Restructuring Committee, she looked directly toward Harold. This company unanimously appoints Harold Gaines as Executive Vice President of Global Corporate Security. His eyes widened. The chairwoman continued reading. The position includes an annual compensation package totaling $2,400,000, full executive benefits, lifetime pension protection, long-term equity ownership, and complete authority to rebuild every security operation across this corporation. Nobody moved. For several seconds, even the cameras remained still. Harold blinked repeatedly. I'm sorry. His voice trembled. I think you've mistaken me for someone else. The chairwoman smiled warmly. No. She handed him the appointment letter. We finally recognized exactly who you are. He accepted the document with both hands. The same hands that had opened doors for executives who rarely remembered his name. His shoulders began to shake. Not from fear. From relief. Tears quietly filled his eyes. He tried to speak again. Nothing came out. After decades of being overlooked, respect had finally arrived. Not as charity. as justice. Reporters rushed forward asking questions. Investors applauded. Employees standing outside the boardroom joined them. The applause continued longer than any executive speech I had ever witnessed. Watching Harold wipe tears from his face reminded me that true leadership is never measured by titles. It is measured by character revealed when nobody is watching. The company had spent years rewarding influence. Today, it rewarded integrity. Financial news channels called the appointment historic before the afternoon ended. Business analysts described it as one of the most remarkable executive promotions in modern corporate history. Employees simply called it fair. As Harold looked across the room, he smiled through tears that words could never fully explain. The man they tried to erase became the safest person in the building. Every choice collected its debt. Chapter summary. Justice spread far beyond the company walls. As the investigation unfolded, every person who had chosen greed over integrity faced consequences they never expected. While careers collapsed and fortunes disappeared, one leader quietly rebuilt a workplace where character mattered more than status. For the first time in years, success belonged to those who had earned it. People often imagine justice arriving with flashing lights and dramatic courtroom verdicts. My experience taught me something very different. Real justice usually arrived quietly. It appeared inside bank statements, employment records, court filings, public notices, and in the silence that followed when excuses finally disappeared. 3 months after the investigation, the corporation looked nothing like the place I had once entered every morning. The portraits of former executives had disappeared from the lobby walls. Their names were quietly removed from conference rooms that once celebrated their leadership. No ceremony. No speeches. Just history correcting itself. Outside, spring sunlight poured through the glass entrance where employees now greeted one another with genuine smiles instead of cautious glances. Fear no longer controlled the building. Respect did. The independent board appointed an entirely new executive team. Every promotion required documented performance instead of personal connections. Anonymous reporting systems protected employees from retaliation. Financial approvals required multiple independent reviews. Compliance officers reported directly to regulators instead of executives. The culture changed one decision at a time. Marcus Hill never treated his promotion as a victory over anyone. He treated it as a responsibility. Every morning, he walked through every floor before entering his office. He knew receptionists by name. He stopped to speak with maintenance crews. He thanked security officers at every entrance. The title on his office door had changed. His character had not. One afternoon, I found him helping a new security recruit adjust her uniform. She looked embarrassed. Marcus simply smiled. "We all start somewhere." She laughed nervously. "I've never worked in a place where executives knew our names." "They should," he replied. "We protect people." Those simple words traveled through the company faster than any corporate memo. Employees began believing leadership again. Not because someone demanded trust. Because someone earned it. Meanwhile, outside the company, consequences continued unfolding. The investment network created by Victor Langford finally collapsed under federal investigation. For years he had promised impossible returns while quietly moving money between shell corporations. When the records became public, thousands of pages revealed exactly how the scheme had survived for so long. Every fraudulent transaction had depended on powerful people choosing silence. Silence finally abandoned them. Among the investors was my own father. He had ignored every warning. He believed wealth always recognized wealth. Instead, it recognized arrogance. The investigation froze nearly every account connected to the fraudulent network. Properties were sold. Luxury vehicles disappeared. Investment portfolios became worthless almost overnight. When I received the public filing, I felt neither satisfaction nor anger. Only acceptance. Choices eventually produce invoices. My mother faced a different kind of consequence. For decades she had carefully protected the family's image. Appearances mattered more than honesty. Community praise mattered more than accountability. Now every charity board quietly removed her name. Social invitations stopped arriving. People who once praised her suddenly avoided eye contact. Reputation, I realized, could take decades to build and only one truth to destroy. My younger brother struggled even more. He had inherited opportunities instead of learning responsibility. Without experienced advisors quietly protecting him, poor decisions multiplied quickly. Within months his businesses defaulted on multiple loans. Creditors filed lawsuits. Bankruptcy followed. Watching the headlines felt strangely distant. I remembered the young man he used to be before entitlement became his identity. Sometimes privilege steals more than it gives. It steals resilience. The attorney who once believed intimidation guaranteed victory also faced judgment. The state bar concluded its disciplinary investigation after reviewing sworn testimony and financial evidence. His license to practice law was permanently revoked. Several months later, federal prosecutors announced additional criminal charges related to obstruction and destruction of business records. The same confidence that once filled every room could not survive documented facts. Evidence remained wonderfully patient. Unlike people, it never changed its story. Life inside the company continued moving forward. Employee turnover reached its lowest level in years. Customer confidence returned. Investors who had nearly abandoned the corporation slowly came back. Not because every problem disappeared. Because honesty finally became more valuable than appearances. One Friday afternoon, employees gathered in the atrium for the opening of a scholarship program supporting the children of hourly workers. Marcus stood quietly near the back instead of standing on the stage prepared for him. I walked beside him. "You should be up there." He smiled. "This isn't about me." "No." I looked across the crowd. "It's about what happens when good people stop believing they're invisible." The applause echoed through the building. Not for one person. For a different future. As I watched employees laugh without fear for the first time, one thought settled comfortably in my mind. Justice had never been about revenge. It had always been about restoring balance. Because karma never rushed. It simply kept perfect records. The legacy they never saw coming. Chapter summary. Years passed, but the choices made during those difficult months continued changing lives. Marcus built opportunities for families who had spent generations working behind the scenes, while I dedicated my career to helping honest people stand against corporate injustice. Looking back, I realized my greatest victory had never been defeating powerful people. It had been proving that fairness could outlive corruption. 5 years can change a skyline. They can also change a soul. Every morning, when I stepped into the headquarters that had once been defined by fear, I noticed something different. Employees smiled without checking who was watching. Security officers greeted executives as equals instead of servants. New hires walked through the lobby believing their talent mattered more than their last name. The building looked the same. The people inside did not. That was the kind of victory no balance sheet could measure. Marcus never became the executive many people expected. He became something much rarer. He became a leader people trusted. His office door remained open almost every afternoon. Anyone could walk inside. A receptionist. A maintenance worker. An intern. A vice president. Everyone received the same respect. One afternoon, he invited me to a ceremony taking place in the company's renovated training center. Sunlight poured through tall windows onto rows of neatly arranged chairs. Families filled every seat. Children laughed while parents quietly wiped away proud tears. A banner stretched across the stage. The Frontline Futures Scholarship Fund. Marcus stepped to the podium wearing the same calm expression I had seen the night he risked everything for another human being. He adjusted the microphone before speaking. My parents spent their entire lives working jobs most people never noticed. The room became still. They taught me that dignity isn't determined by a title. He smiled toward the audience. It is determined by character. Applause echoed throughout the hall. He announced that the scholarship would provide full college tuition for children of security officers, custodians, cafeteria workers, receptionists, and every frontline employee whose work often went unnoticed. The company committed $25 million to establish the permanent endowment. No cameras had requested the event. The media came anyway. Stories like this had become rare enough to deserve attention. After the ceremony, a young girl approached Marcus holding her acceptance letter with trembling hands. "My mom works night security," she said softly. "I never thought someone like us would get a chance." Marcus knelt until they stood eye to eye. "You earned this." "No," she whispered. "You gave it to me." He smiled gently. "I only opened the door." Watching that conversation reminded me why justice mattered. It was never about destroying lives. It was about creating opportunities that corruption had stolen. My own career had changed as well. I left the corporation 2 years after the restructuring. Not because I wanted distance from the company. Because I realized my work was larger than one organization. I founded a legal practice dedicated exclusively to representing employees harmed by corporate misconduct. Whistleblowers. Wrongfully terminated workers. Victims of discrimination. Families whose voices had been ignored because powerful people assumed money always spoke louder than truth. Every victory reminded me of where my own journey had begun. Many clients asked how I stayed calm during negotiations. They expected complicated legal theories. Instead, I always answered honestly. I prepare longer than my opponents expect. Preparation had become my greatest advantage. Not anger. Not revenge. Preparation. Sometimes I drove past my childhood neighborhood on quiet Sunday afternoons. The old house still stood. The memories remained. The pain no longer lived there. Time had transformed wounds into wisdom. Looking back, I finally understood something I couldn't have understood on the night everything fell apart. Revenge was never my destination. If humiliation had been my goal, I would have become exactly like the people who tried to break me. Justice demanded something greater. It demanded fairness. It demanded accountability. It demanded the courage to let truth speak louder than bitterness. That lesson became the greatest inheritance of my life. So before this story ends, I want to speak directly to you. If you've ever been overlooked because of your background, your position, the color of your skin, or the title on your business card, remember this. Your worth has never depended on someone else's recognition. Dignity cannot be taken from you. Sometimes it is hidden beneath disappointment. Sometimes it is buried beneath betrayal. Sometimes even you forget it is still there. But it never disappears. Keep preparing when nobody is applauding. Keep learning when nobody is watching. Keep acting with integrity when shortcuts seem easier. People may overlook your effort today. They may even celebrate your failure. What they don't know is that quiet determination grows strongest in silence. And when the moment finally arrives, you won't need revenge to prove your value. Your life will do it for you. Never underestimate the